The crunch of gravel under tires isn't a sound a man ignores, especially when those tires are trespassing on land he paid for in sweat and blood. Karen flew past my private property sign yet again, sunglasses gleaming, acting like my ranch was her personal shortcut to brunch. No brake lights, no shame, just that smug look that said, rules are for other people. First time I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Second time, I warned her clear as day. By the third, she smiled and told me, "What are you going to do about it?" That's when everything changed. She thought she was untouchable, HOA royalty with a crown of fines and threats. But while she was busy ruling suburbia, I was engineering a little wake-up call. And when it hits, she's going to learn exactly whose land she's been stealing inches from. Before we get started, drop a comment. Where are you watching from and what time is it there? My name's Colt Bridger, 54 years old, third-generation cattle rancher in a little pocket of eastern Colorado called Saddleback Ridge. My grandfather broke ground on this land during the Depression. My father expanded it while working a second job for 20 years. And my wife Mary Ann and I poured everything we had into making it sustainable. Grass-fed beef, farmers markets, a couple farm-to-table restaurants in Denver that still carry our name. Mary Ann passed 6 years ago, cancer. Our daughter Della came back to help me run the place after that. She's 28 now. Got her mother's eyes and her grandfather's stubbornness. Every morning starts the same way. Coffee brewing while the smell of hay drifts through the screen door. That familiar creak of the third porch step. Morning fog sitting in the valley like spilled milk. For 90 years, the Bridger family lived in peace out here. Then came the developers. In 2011, they bought the old Miller farm next door and built Ridgecrest Estates. 47 homes. McMansions with 3-car garages and HOA rules about what shade of beige you could paint your shutters. Here's the thing about Ridgecrest. The only road in and out runs along a 200-yard stretch that crosses the corner of my property. There's an easement from 1952 that allows residents to pass through. My family never had a problem with it. Neighbors are neighbors. But then Priscilla Vanderkamp moved in. 61 years old, retired pharmaceutical sales manager, HOA president for 7 straight years. Everyone called her Prissy, though never to her face. She lived in the biggest house in the development, 5,000 square feet overlooking my ranch. And from day one, she made it clear she didn't like what she saw. The complaints started in 2019. Dust from my cattle drives, the smell of agricultural waste, noise from my equipment, hay bales that were visually offensive. You could smell her coming before you saw her. This overpowering floral perfume that hung in the air long after she left. Her husband Gerald was a semi-retired real estate attorney. Played golf with half the county officials. Drove a Tesla with a bumper sticker that said, "I'd rather be golfing." He had the look of a man who'd learned long ago to just stay quiet and let his wife run the show. February 2023. I installed a simple gate across the access road on my property. Not blocking the easement, just marking the boundary. The gate had a basic latch, wasn't even locked. All you had to do was stop, open it, drive through, and close it behind you. Priscilla filed a complaint within 48 hours, said the gate impeded access. County ruled in my favor. Gates on my property. Easement allows passage but doesn't prohibit gates. Case closed. 1 week later, I heard that sound for the first time. Metal shrieking. That sad, low groan of steel bending. Priscilla had driven straight through my gate without stopping. Snapped the latch. Bent the lower rail. Left it swinging in the wind, banging against the post with every gust. I called the sheriff. Deputy came out, looked around, took some notes. "Ma'am says the gate swung open on its own and hit her car," he told me. "This is a civil matter. You'll need to sue her in small claims." He didn't even take photos. I watched him drive away. Della asked me why I was smiling. "Just thinking," I said, "about how much I've missed paperwork." Over the next 6 weeks, Priscilla drove through my gate 4 more times. Same pattern every time. She'd approach at normal speed, wouldn't even tap the brakes, just pushed right through like the gate wasn't there. Each repair cost me somewhere between $180 and $340 in materials. That's not counting my time. I filed a report after every incident, and every time, the deputies treated it like I was wasting their afternoon. He said, she said, they'd tell me. Nothing we can do. Then came the 4th incident. I'd upgraded my trail camera by then, got her clear as day on video, You could see her accelerating toward the gate, not slowing down, speeding up. I showed the footage to the deputy. He squinted at the screen for maybe 10 seconds. "Can't prove she saw the gate was closed," he said. "Inconclusive." That's when I realized the sheriff's department wasn't going to help me. Gerald Vanderkamp's golf buddies had seen to that. But Priscilla wasn't satisfied with just destroying my gates. She wanted to squeeze me from every angle. See, she couldn't directly regulate my property. I wasn't part of her HOA. But she could control what Ridgecrest residents did. So she passed a new rule. Homeowners were prohibited from purchasing goods or services from non-approved agricultural vendors. 3 families in Ridgecrest had been buying beef from me for years. Now they were facing fines if they continued. One of them called to apologize. Wade Hensley, 48 years old, plumber by trade. He'd moved to Ridgecrest for his wife's sake, but you could tell suburban life was slowly killing his soul. "She's got everyone scared," Wade told me. "She fined the marshals $500 because their kid's basketball hoop was 2 inches too tall." 2 inches, Colt. I thanked him for the call, told him not to worry about the beef, but I filed that conversation away in my memory. Wade Hensley was a man with a grudge, and grudges can be useful. That night, I sat down at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a pot of coffee. Started building what I call a documentation protocol. I upgraded my security system, 4 cameras now, night vision, license plate capture, timestamps synced to an atomic clock. I installed a second gate 50 feet further down the road. This one had a spring-loaded closure mechanism, harder to push through. And I started keeping a formal log, date, time, weather conditions, damage assessment, repair costs, photographs of everything. Here's something most folks don't know. In Colorado, once property damage from the same person exceeds $2,000 cumulative, it can be charged as a Class 1 misdemeanor instead of just a civil infraction. But you need documentation that'll hold up in court. The kind of documentation I'd spent 22 years learning how to build. Takeaway: if someone's damaging your property repeatedly, keep records like your case depends on it, because it does. Priscilla's response to my second gate was predictable. She just drove through both of them. But now, she was getting annoyed. She posted on the Ridgecrest community Facebook page that night, said her HOA attorney was reviewing the easement, called my gates illegal impediments, promised the community they'd be taking action. The comments were mixed, plenty of supporters, but also some folks staying quiet, people who weren't sure they liked where this was heading. I didn't respond online, never do. Instead, I sent a request to the county recorder's office for a certified copy of the original 1952 easement. Cost me $25 and took 3 weeks to arrive. When it did, I sat on my porch with a highlighter and read every word. That's when I found it. The easement didn't just limit the number of daily passages. It specified that access was granted for residential purposes only, and it was tied specifically to the owners and residents of the property formerly known as Miller Farm Parcel 7A22. Priscilla had been running a little side business out of her home. Notary services, document preparation, clients coming and going. If she was using the easement for commercial purposes, she was in violation of its terms. I didn't act on it. Not yet. Just made a note in the margin of my legal pad. Save for later. That evening, Della and I ate dinner on the porch. The sky was turning pink and orange over the mountains. "Is all this stress worth it?" she asked me. "Mom would have told you to just take down the gates." I thought about that for a moment. Your mother also would have said that giving bullies what they want just makes them hungrier. I looked out at the land, our land. She didn't raise quitters. Della smiled. She didn't raise you. You two raised each other. She was right about that. By the way, you want to know what Priscilla drove? White Cadillac Escalade. Vanity plate that read PRSY1. I'm not a petty man, but I'll admit I took some satisfaction watching that chrome bumper get more dented every time she used my gate as a battering ram. At $800 per bumper repair, I figured God was handling some of the justice himself. 3 weeks later, Priscilla decided property damage wasn't enough. She wanted to come after my livelihood. I got a call from the county one morning. Some inspector named Davies. Young guy, sounded apologetic before he even explained why he was calling. "Mr. Bridger, we received a complaint about agricultural runoff violations on your property. I'm required to conduct an inspection." I told him to come on out. Nothing to hide. He showed up that afternoon, walked the property with a clipboard, took some soil samples, checked my drainage systems. The whole time, he kept glancing at me like he felt bad about the whole thing. "Mr. Bridger," he finally said, "I'm not finding any violations here. Your operation is clean." "Didn't think you would." He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "The complaint mentions some pretty specific details about your property. Things someone would only know if they'd been here. On your land. Without permission." I let that sink in. Someone had been trespassing on my ranch to gather information for a false complaint. "Appreciate you telling me that," I said. He nodded and drove off. I added a note to my file. Suspected trespassing. Possible witness, Inspector Davies, County Environmental Services. But Priscilla wasn't just coming at me through official channels. She was working the social angle too. The following week, I stopped by the Saddleback Ridge Diner for coffee. Place I'd been going since I was a kid. Marge behind the counter. Same cracked vinyl booths. Same smell of burnt coffee and bacon grease. I heard my name before I saw who was talking. Two women I didn't recognize. Sitting in a booth by the window. One of them saying something about that rancher who's blocking the road and holding the neighborhood hostage. The other one nodding. I heard he's trying to force them to pay some kind of toll. I didn't say anything. Just ordered my coffee and sat where they could see me. Watched their faces go pale when Marge called me by name. Priscilla was spreading lies, poisoning the well, making me the villain in a story I never asked to be part of. That night, I called Wade Hensley. "I need a favor," I told him. "A real one this time." "Name it." "Colorado law says HOAs have to provide financial records to any homeowner who requests them. Takes about 10 days. And those records can be shared with third parties if the homeowner consents." Silence on the line. Then Wade laughed. "You want me to request the HOA's books? I want you to request everything. Every financial statement, every contract, every receipt, going back 3 years. Prissy's gonna have a fit. That's what I'm counting on." Wade agreed. 10 days later, a thick envelope showed up at his door. We spread the documents across my kitchen table. Bank statements, vendor contracts, meeting minutes. It took us 3 hours to find what I was looking for, but when we found it, my blood went cold. The HOA had been paying something called legal consulting fees for 3 years running, $45,000 total. All of it going to a company called Vanderkamp Legal Consulting, LLC, Gerald's side business, Priscilla's husband. The HOA was paying Gerald to provide legal advice to the HOA that Priscilla controlled. They were literally paying themselves. Self-dealing, potentially illegal, definitely unethical. Wade looked at me. "What do we do with this?" "Not yet," I said. "We're not ready yet, but we hold on to it." Meanwhile, Priscilla was still focused on my gates. The count was up to 9 now. She'd gotten comfortable, thought she was winning. That's exactly what I wanted her to think. The next week, she pushed harder, called an emergency HOA meeting, proposed a special assessment of $800 per household. The money would go toward a road maintenance and legal defense fund. The legal defense fund was described in the meeting minutes as being for ongoing disputes with adjacent property owners. She was raising money to sue me, using her neighbors' wallets to do it. I could have exposed the self-dealing right then, blown the whole thing wide open. But I've seen too many good cases fall apart because someone got impatient, showed their hand too early. In litigation, timing is everything. You let the other side commit to a position, let them dig themselves deeper. Then you show them they've been standing on quicksand the whole time. So I waited, kept documenting, kept building, and I started making calls to a property attorney in Denver, $300 an hour, worth every penny. "The gates are legal," she confirmed. "The easement terms are clear. If they sue, they'll lose. But they could drag it out for 2 years and $50,000. I thanked her and hung up. $50,000 I didn't have. At the farmer's market that Saturday, one of my regulars pulled me aside. Bertie Callahan, 67, retired school teacher, bought a quarter beef from me every fall. "You look tired, Colt." "Everything all right?" I gave her the short version. The gates, the complaints, the HOA. She shook her head slowly. "My sister Opal lives in Ridgecrest. Says that Vanderkamp woman fined someone for having the wrong shade of beige on their shutters. Sahara sand instead of desert khaki." She leaned in. Opal's been waiting years for someone to stand up to her. I filed that away too. Bertie's sister Opal, another potential ally. The web was starting to take shape. May 2023. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday. I knew what it was before I opened it. That heavy, cream-colored envelope. The law firm's name embossed in the corner. The kind of letter designed to intimidate before you even read the first word. Cease and desist. Priscilla had hired a real attorney this time, not Gerald. Someone from a firm in Denver with a reputation for aggressive litigation. The letter claimed my gates constituted tortious interference with easement rights, demanded I remove them within 30 days, threatened a lawsuit seeking $50,000 in damages plus attorney's fees. But here's the part that made my jaw tighten. The letter was CC'd to the editor of the Saddleback Ridge Sentinel, our local weekly paper. Circulation maybe 4,000. She was trying to embarrass me publicly. Sure enough, that Thursday's edition ran a story. HOA disputes access road with local rancher. The reporter had tried to be neutral, but Priscilla was clearly the source. She got 3 paragraphs of quotes. I got 2 sentences. We simply want safe, unimpeded access to our homes, Priscilla told the paper. Mr. Bridger's gates have caused damage to multiple vehicles and created a safety hazard for our families. My quote was simple. The gates are on my property. The easement allows me to have gates. I'd be happy to discuss this further once Mrs. Vanderkamp stops driving through them. The comment section on the newspaper's website lit up, heated, divided, exactly what Priscilla wanted. But I wasn't playing defense anymore. I had my attorney draft a formal response to the cease and desist. We included 11 documented instances of gate damage, repair receipts totaling $2,847, security camera footage, every deputy report number. We also included a certified copy of the 1952 easement with the relevant passages highlighted, and the county's ruling from February confirming my gates were permitted. Then we added something that made my attorney smile, a counterclaim notice, intentional destruction of property, trespass, and abuse of process for the frivolous cease and desist itself. The message was clear. You want to go to court? Let's go. But you're not going to like what I bring. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. Priscilla's attorney went quiet. I figured she was regrouping. Then came the offer, an envelope with no return address. Inside, a letter from a development company I'd never heard of. They wanted to buy my ranch. $1.2 million for 180 acres. Sounds like a lot, right? But agricultural land in my area runs $8,000 to $12,000 per acre. Properly appraised, my ranch was worth closer to $2 million. They were lowballing me by almost half. I did some digging. The development company had connections to Gerald Vanderkamp's real estate network. That's when the whole picture snapped into focus. This was never about access. This was never about gates or easements or property values. This was about acquisition. My ranch, developed into housing, would be worth $5 to $8 million. Gerald's connections. Priscilla's HOA control. If they could push out the rancher, they'd probably collect a finder's fee from any development deal. They wanted my land. The harassment was designed to make me desperate enough to sell. I sat on my porch that night, watching the stars come out over the mountains. The anger I felt wasn't hot anymore. It was cold, focused. My grandfather broke his back building this ranch during the Depression. My father expanded it while working a second job. My wife and I poured our lives into it, and this woman thought she could just take it. The next morning, I called Wade Hensley. I need another favor, bigger than the last one. What do you need? I need you to run for HOA board. Long pause, then a nervous laugh. Against Prissy? Colt, she'll crucify me. She'll fine me for breathing wrong. Not if we give the homeowners a reason to vote for you, and I think we might have a few reasons. I told him about the self-dealing, the $45,000 in consulting fees paid to Gerald's company, the fact that the HOA was essentially funding the Vanderkamp's lifestyle. Wade was quiet for a long time. The annual meeting's in September, he finally said. Board elections are held then. 4 months, I said. That's our target. That night, I walked out to the edge of my property. There's a cottonwood tree there that Marianne planted the year we got married. Her grave is underneath it. I stood there in the dark, talking to her the way I sometimes do. I know you'd tell me to let it go, but Mari, I can't. This isn't just land. It's everything we built, everything we were going to leave Della. I touched the rough bark of the tree. I'm not letting some perfumed bully with a god complex take that away. The wind picked up. A leaf fell and landed on my shoulder. I took it as a sign. Wade's document requests had been piling up for weeks. Every financial record the HOA was legally required to provide. Every contract, every receipt. We spread it all across my kitchen table on a Saturday night. Coffee getting cold. Highlighters wearing down to nothing. My reading glasses giving me a headache. It was almost midnight when Wade found it. "Colt, look at this." He slid a contract across the table, dated 2019, an agreement between the Ridgecrest HOA and a company called Ridgeline Paving LLC, $38,000 over 3 years, for maintenance of private access roads within and adjacent to Ridgecrest estates. I read it twice to make sure I was seeing it right. Wade, there are no private roads in Ridgecrest. Every street in that subdivision is public, maintained by the county. I know. I flipped to the signature page, then to the incorporation documents Wade had pulled from the Secretary of State's website. Ridgeline Paving LLC, registered agent Gerald Vanderkamp, company status, dissolved in 2020. The contract payments continued through 2022, 2 full years after the company stopped existing. My hands were steady, but my heart was pounding. "This isn't self-dealing," I said quietly. "This is fraud." Wade leaned back in his chair. "What do we do?" I thought about it for a long moment. The smart move, the patient move. Not yet. We're not ready. But this is a felony, and if we expose it now, Priscilla claims ignorance, blames Gerald, maybe even throws him under the bus to save herself. I gathered the documents into a neat stack. We need more witnesses, more evidence, an airtight case with no escape route. Wade looked skeptical. And if she finds out we're digging, then we move fast. But until then, we play it slow. Here's something I learned in 22 years of litigation work. Under Colorado law, HOA fraud can be prosecuted under something called COCCA, the Colorado Organized Crime Control Act. It's basically the state version of RICO. If you can prove a pattern of fraudulent transactions, it's not just a civil matter, it's criminal. We're talking potential prison time. Takeaway. Document the pattern. One bad contract might be a mistake. Multiple bad contracts is conspiracy. I looked at the calendar on my wall. September 15th, the annual HOA meeting. Board elections. "That's our target," I said. "We expose everything at the meeting, in front of everyone, with witnesses, and then we file with the state attorney general." Wade nodded slowly. "And until then?" "Until then, we let Priscilla think she's winning. Keep her focused on the gates. Keep her from noticing the ground shifting under her feet." I walked Wade to his truck. The night air was cool. Stars scattered across the sky like salt on black velvet. "Colt," he said before climbing in, "why are you doing all this? I mean, you could just sell, take the money, walk away." I looked back at my house, at the barn, at the fields stretching out toward the mountains. My family's been on this land for 90 years. My wife is buried under that cottonwood tree. I turned back to him. "Some things aren't for sale." He nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. Gate count, 13. Damage documented, $3,641. Evidence of fraud, $38,000 minimum. The hunter had become the hunted. She just didn't know it yet. The next 4 months were about building a case, building a coalition, building something Priscilla couldn't tear down. First, I needed allies. Wade was already committed. He'd run for one of the 3 board seats up for election in September. His platform was simple: transparency and fiscal responsibility. Nothing controversial, nothing Priscilla could attack directly. I coached him on messaging. Don't go after her personally. Just keep asking reasonable questions. Let the answers do the damage. Next came Bertie's sister, Opal Callahan, 71 years old, retired accountant. She'd lived in Ridgecrest for 8 years and had always suspected something was off about the finances. When I showed her the Ridgeline paving contract, her face went pale. "I knew it," she whispered. I asked about road maintenance at a meeting 2 years ago. Priscilla nearly bit my head off. Now I know why. Opal agreed to help. She'd quietly talk to other residents, identify potential allies, people who'd been fined unfairly or pushed around. Then there was Marshall Webb, 45, owned one of the farm-to-table restaurants in Denver that carried my beef. He had connections in media and business circles. I'd done him a favor during COVID, kept supplying beef at reduced rates when other ranchers jacked up their prices. He remembered. "I know a reporter at the Denver Post," he told me. "She covers HOA corruption, done 3 investigations in the past 2 years. When you're ready, not before, I can make that introduction." I thanked him and told him I'd be in touch. The legal strategy came together piece by piece. My attorney explained something called a notice of claim. It's a formal document you file with the county before a lawsuit. Costs about $50. What it does is put the other party on official notice and stops the statute of limitations clock. Even if Priscilla tried to delay or destroy evidence, the clock was now ticking. Takeaway. A notice of claim is like pulling a fire alarm. Doesn't put out the fire, but makes sure everyone knows it's burning. Meanwhile, I had to deal with the gates. I ordered materials for a new one. Steel I-beam construction, anchored in concrete footings 2 feet deep. This wasn't a gate you could push through with an Escalade. This was a gate that would push back. I also installed a proper cattle guard next to it. Residents on foot or bike could use the cattle guard. Cars had to use the gate. The smell of fresh concrete, the industrial clang of steel being welded. It felt good to build something that would last. But here's the clever part. I removed the inner gate, left only the reinforced outer one. Priscilla had gotten comfortable smashing through my flimsy gates. She expected me to keep rebuilding them. The reinforced gate would be a surprise. Sometimes the best trap doesn't look like a trap. Sometimes it looks like giving up. The coalition grew slowly, but steadily. We held our first real meeting at my ranch in late June. Wade, Opal, 3 other Ridgecrest residents who'd been quietly fed up for years. Della served coffee while they shared their horror stories. The shade of beige fine. A family threatened with liens because their Christmas lights stayed up until January 3rd. A teenager's basketball hoop that was 2 inches too tall. Then Vernon Cobb spoke up, 73, retired postal worker, quiet man, hadn't said a word all evening. "My wife died last year," he said. 2 weeks after the funeral, Priscilla fined me because I hadn't mowed the lawn. $50 a day until I complied. I was still in shock. I just paid it. The room went silent. Opal shook her head slowly. "That's not an HOA. That's a protection racket." I looked around the table. These weren't troublemakers. They were ordinary people who'd been bullied for years by a woman drunk on petty power. "Then let's shut it down," I said. We set our target, September 15th, annual meeting. Wade would run for board. We'd expose the fraud publicly. File the complaint with the Attorney General. Let the chips fall. Gate count, still 13. Priscilla had been quiet for 3 weeks. Too quiet. I should have known something was coming. Late July, 3 in the morning. I woke to the sound of my dogs going absolutely crazy. Not their normal barking. This was different, frantic, terrified. I grabbed my boots and ran outside in my boxers. The sky to the east was glowing orange. My hay barn was on fire. 40 tons of hay, a year's worth of feed for my cattle. Flames climbing 50 feet into the night sky. The heat so intense I couldn't get within 100 yards. By the time the volunteer fire department arrived, there was nothing left to save. Just ashes and twisted metal, and the acrid smell of smoke that would cling to my clothes for weeks. The fire investigator showed up at dawn, walked the perimeter with a flashlight, took samples, asked questions. His conclusion came 3 days later. Accelerant detected, gasoline, poured around the base of the structure, arson. The county sheriff assigned a real detective this time, Elena Ruiz, 38 years old, transferred from Denver PD a couple years back. No nonsense, sharp eyes, the kind of cop who actually wanted to solve cases. She came to my house and spent 2 hours reviewing my documentation. The gates, the complaints, the cease and desist, the development offer. "You've got quite a file here, Mr. Bridger," she said. 22 years as a paralegal, old habits. Any idea who might have done this? I chose my words carefully. I can't prove anything, but I can tell you who has motive. She nodded slowly, wrote something in her notebook. The investigation hit walls. No witnesses, No usable security footage. My cameras covered the gates and the house, not the hay barn 200 yards away. But there was one piece of evidence. Tire tracks near the barn. Distinctive tread pattern. Something with an aggressive off-road design. Not the kind of tires you'd see on a typical sedan. Detective Ruiz couldn't share investigative details, but she pulled me aside before she left. "Mr. Bridger, I'd recommend you pay attention to what vehicles come and go from Ridgecrest. Might be interesting." I understood what she was telling me. She suspected the connection. She just needed more evidence. That night, I expanded my camera system. 8 additional units covering every angle of the property, motion-activated floodlights, and 1 hidden camera disguised as a birdhouse overlooking the access road from Ridgecrest. Every vehicle, every license plate, every timestamp. The community response surprised me. Word of the arson spread through Saddleback Ridge like wildfire. Pun intended. Harlan McCoy, the volunteer fire chief, spoke at the next town council meeting. 62 years old, voice like gravel, respected by everyone. "Someone tried to burn out one of our own," he said. "Whether this was connected to the disputes we've all heard about, I can't say. But I will say this. Colt Bridger's family has been part of this community for 3 generations. An attack on him is an attack on all of us." Half the room stood and applauded. Priscilla was there. She did not clap. She released a statement through the Ridgecrest Facebook page that night, offered her sympathies for my loss, firmly rejected any insinuation that the HOA was involved. The comment section was mostly supportive of her, but one anonymous account posted something interesting. Funny timing, considering the lawsuit threats from last month. The comment disappeared within hours, but screenshots circulated. The financial damage was real. 40 tons of hay at current prices. About $12,000. The barn itself would cost $30,000 to rebuild. Insurance would cover most of it, but I had a $5,000 deductible, and claims take months to process. I was bleeding money. Attorney fees, security equipment, insurance gaps. Total out-of-pocket so far, roughly $18,000. Della suggested selling some cattle early to cover costs. I agreed reluctantly. I'd been building that herd for 6 years. Selling early meant losing the premium I would have gotten at full weight. Another $8,000 in lost profit. Another line item on Priscilla's tab. That evening, I stood in the ashes of my barn, sifting through the debris, looking for anything salvageable. I found it half buried under a charred beam, a metal sign that used to hang on the barn door. Bridger Family Ranch, established 1934. The edges were warped. The paint was blistered and black, but you could still read every word. I carried it back to the house and hung it on my front porch, a reminder of what I was fighting for, and a message to anyone watching. I'm not leaving. August, 6 weeks until the annual meeting. Priscilla could sense something shifting. Wade had been less compliant at HOA meetings, asking questions, taking notes. A few other residents were starting to murmur, so she launched a full-scale offensive. Glossy mailers went out to every household in Ridgecrest. Professional printing, color photos. The headlines screamed in bold red letters, "Protect your property values. Vote no on reckless changes." Wade was named specifically, called a troublemaker who wanted to expose our community to frivolous lawsuits and open our private financial records to outsiders. The outsider, of course, was me, but that wasn't all. Priscilla filed another complaint with the county, this time claiming my cattle had been trespassing on Ridgecrest property. Said she'd found cow manure on the access road. Complete fabrication. My cattle hadn't left the far pastures in months. I'd kept them there specifically to avoid any possible conflict. I had Wade and Opal canvass the neighborhood. Simple question. Have you seen any cows on the road? Not a single person had. 12 residents signed statements confirming they'd witnessed no cattle on Ridgecrest property. I submitted those statements to the county, along with GPS tracking data from my cattle tags. Every cow accounted for, every movement logged. The complaint was dismissed within a week, but the smear campaign was having an effect. Some residents who'd been leaning toward Wade started getting nervous. Nobody wanted to be on Priscilla's bad side. Then something unexpected happened. 1 week before the annual meeting, a black Tesla pulled up my driveway. I recognized the bumper sticker before I saw the driver. Gerald Vanderkamp. Alone. He got out of the car looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot, hands shaking slightly. "Mr. Bridger, I need to talk to you." I didn't invite him inside. We stood on my porch. "I'm here to make you an offer," he said. "Not from my wife. From me, personally." I waited. "I'll cover all your property damage, every penny, the gates, the barn, everything." He swallowed hard. "Plus an additional $50,000. Cash." $50,000. That was real money. More than enough to cover everything I'd spent and then some. "What do I have to do?" "Drop your complaints. Convince your friend Wade to withdraw from the election, and we all move on with our lives." I studied his face, the desperation in his eyes, the way his voice cracked on that last sentence. "Is that an admission that your wife is responsible for the damage to my gates?" He stiffened. "It's a settlement offer, no admission of anything." "And the barn fire?" His face went pale. For just a second, something flickered in his eyes. Fear. "I don't know anything about that." I let the silence stretch. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves of Marianne's cottonwood tree. "Get off my property, Gerald." He didn't move. "Mr. Bridger, please. You don't understand. Priscilla, she doesn't know when to stop. I'm trying to protect everyone here, including you." "No," I said quietly. "You're trying to protect yourself, and her, because you know what's coming." He opened his mouth to say something else, then closed it, turned around, got in his Tesla, drove away. I watched until the dust settled behind him. That night, I called Detective Ruiz. "Gerald Vanderkamp just offered me $50,000 to drop everything and go away." Silence on the line. Then, "That's interesting." He got real nervous when I mentioned the barn fire. "Mr. Bridger, I can't discuss an ongoing investigation, but I would recommend you attend the HOA meeting next week. You might find it interesting." The final preparations came together, documents organized and copied, financial discrepancies highlighted, the Ridgeline paving fraud laid out in clear, simple terms. Marshall Webb confirmed the Denver Post reporter was standing by, ready to run the story the day after the meeting. Wade practiced his talking points. Opal rehearsed her presentation of the financial evidence. And I had one more card to play. I'd filed a formal complaint with the Colorado Attorney General's office 3 days earlier. Fraud, embezzlement, self-dealing, all documented, all sourced. The investigation would take months, but the complaint was on record. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. I sat on my porch with my dogs, watching the stars wheel overhead, the smell of sage on the wind, the distant lowing of cattle settling in for the night. That particular silence of the high plains, that isn't really silence at all. Della came out and sat beside me. "You ready for tomorrow?" I thought about that question for a long moment. I've been ready for this my whole life. I just didn't know it. She looked at me, waiting. "Your grandfather used to say something. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing." I took a deep breath. I spent 22 years doing paperwork for other people's fights. This time, it's my fight, and I'm done doing nothing. We sat together until dawn started to lighten the eastern sky. It was going to be a hell of a day. September 15th, 7 in the evening, Ridgecrest Estates Community Center. The parking lot was packed. Usually these meetings drew maybe 25 people, half of them asleep by the second agenda item. Tonight, I counted 43 residents filing through the doors, plus me, Della, Detective Ruiz in plain clothes, sitting in the back row, and a woman nobody recognized, taking notes in a small spiral notebook. Marshall Webb's reporter friend from the Denver Post. Priscilla sat at a table at the front of the room, Gerald on her left, sweating through his polo shirt. 2 other board members on her right, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. The air was thick with tension. You could feel it. Everyone knew something was about to happen. They just didn't know what. First order of business, board elections. 3 seats up for vote, 3 candidates. Priscilla running for re-election, Wade Hensley, and a Priscilla loyalist named Dottie Carmichael. Paper ballots passed out. 5 minutes to vote. The community center manager collected them and started counting. The room was dead silent. I watched Priscilla's face, that confident smile she always wore, but something around the edges, a tightness, a crack in the armor. The community center manager cleared her throat. Results are as follows. Wade Hensley, 26 votes. Dottie Carmichael, 22 votes. Priscilla Vanderkamp, 19 votes. For a moment, nobody moved. Then someone in the back started clapping. Others joined in. Not raucous applause, more like relief, like a pressure valve finally releasing. Priscilla's face went white, then red. She gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned the color of bone. There must be a recount. The count is certified, Mrs. Vanderkamp. The community center manager's voice was steady. Mr. Hensley and Mrs. Carmichael are elected to the board. Wade took his seat at the table. His hands were trembling slightly, but his voice was calm. Thank you all. My first motion is to open the floor for homeowner concerns before we proceed to other business. The vote was quick, 2-1. Motion passed. Opal Callahan stood up, 71 years old, voice steady as steel. I'd like to raise a concern about the HOA's financial records. Specifically, payments to a company called Ridgeline Paving LLC. Priscilla cut in immediately. That's not appropriate for this forum. Financial matters should be discussed in executive session. Actually, Madam Former President, Wade's voice was firm. It is appropriate. Please continue, Ms. Callahan. Opal opened a folder, the same documents we'd been poring over for months. Ridgeline Paving LLC was paid $38,000 over 3 years for road maintenance services. The company was dissolved in 2020. The registered agent was Gerald Vanderkamp. She paused. Let that sink in. The roads it was supposedly maintaining are public roads, maintained by the county. Can anyone explain where that money actually went? Every head in the room turned toward Gerald. He looked like a man watching his own execution. Priscilla tried to regain control. This is defamatory. You have no right to make these accusations without... I stood up. Actually, she has every right, and so do I. I walked to the front of the room, placed a thick folder on the table. This is a copy of every document related to Ridgeline Paving. Bank records, incorporation papers, payment receipts. It's also going to the Colorado Attorney General's office tomorrow morning. I turned to the reporter in the back, and to the Denver Post. The silence was absolute. Then Detective Ruiz stood up, showed her badge. Mrs. Vanderkamp, Mr. Vanderkamp, I'm going to need you both to come with me. We have some questions regarding an ongoing arson investigation. Gerald's face crumbled. The tire tracks, I said. From my barn fire. They matched your vehicle, didn't they, Gerald? Detective Ruiz's expression didn't change, but she didn't deny it either. Gerald started shaking. His voice came out in a broken whisper. It wasn't supposed to. I just wanted to scare him into... Gerald! Priscilla's voice was a whip crack. Don't say another word. But it was too late. The room had heard. The reporter was writing furiously. Detective Ruiz gestured toward the door. Let's continue this conversation at the station. As Priscilla gathered her purse, she stopped in front of me. Her eyes were pure venom. This isn't over. I met her gaze, held it. Yeah, it is. For you. They walked out together. Gerald shuffling. Priscilla, rigid with fury. 43 neighbors watching in stunned silence. Then Vernon Cobb stood up, the quiet man whose wife had died, who'd been fined $50 a day while he was still in shock from grief. I moved that the board issue a formal apology to Mr. Bridger for the actions of our former president. The vote was unanimous, 3-0. People started applauding again. This time it was real, loud, the sound of a community finally breathing free. Wade caught my eye across the room, nodded once. We'd done it. The legal process took almost a year to play out completely. Gerald Vanderkamp was charged with first-degree arson and fraud. He pleaded guilty to reduced charges in exchange for cooperation. Served 18 months in county jail plus full restitution. Priscilla fought longer, claimed she didn't know anything about Gerald's schemes. The evidence suggested otherwise. In the end, she took a deal. 5 years probation, $45,000 in restitution, and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board in Colorado. The alternative was prison. Even Priscilla knew when she was beaten. Civil settlement came through 6 months later, $67,000. Enough to cover the gates, the barn, my legal fees, and then some. But the money wasn't what mattered most. The Ridgecrest HOA underwent a complete transformation. Wade served as board president for 2 years before stepping down. My work here is done, he said. New policies went into effect. Capped fines. Mandatory financial transparency. term limits for board members. The days of petty tyranny were over. Something else changed too. The relationship between Ridgecrest and my ranch. Built with help from neighbors who showed up without being asked. I hung that old metal sign on the new barn door. Bridger Family Ranch, estimated 1934, professionally restored. Good as new. Della got engaged last spring. Local veterinarian named Tyler who specializes in cattle. Good man, steady hands. He looks at her the way I used to look at Mary Ann. The wedding's next summer. We're having it here, on the ranch, under the cottonwood tree. Some folks have asked what happened to Priscilla. Last I heard, she and Gerald moved to Arizona, somewhere with no H. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with an HOA nightmare? Someone who abused their petty power to make your life miserable? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. And who knows, your story might just become the next video. And if this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt crushed by someone who thought their title made them untouchable, hit that subscribe button. We post new stories every week about regular people who fought back against bullies, scammers, and tyrants. You won't want to miss what's coming next. I'm Colt Bridger. Thanks for watching. And remember whose land you're standing on.